2 at 836.
Welcome to an episode of Community Off the Cuff. I'm Nick Rankin. I'm sitting down today with Carol-Lynn Turner of Night Flight Basketball and state recognition fame, having been awarded for, what was it called? I forget what it said exactly on your plaque.
The Jenkins Award, or the state recognition for, it was a citation.
It was a citation?
Yeah, Rose City
That's the
United
big, well, yeah, but you got one of your own.
I got one too, yes.
Individually honored.
I did. Yes, it was a citation or a official statement from the Lieutenant Governor, as well as a proclamation or citation from the General Assembly. I can't remember.
Just the Lieutenant Governor, huh?
Just, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You'll get there.
I don't know. I found out they give those out a lot, so I don't know.
Do they?
They do.
Oh.
I think so.
Well, I've never seen one given out before, so I'm
I heard
still
the mayor
impressed.
gives them out pretty often, too. They have to slow him down.
Yeah, well, that's what you want to do, is you want to make it like a rarity, and then you can really brag about it.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
No, but I think it was absolutely worthwhile, and it was really for your work with race relations.
Yeah.
Right? That was the major contributing factor there. And sorry, we have Ryan O'Connell here too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Say hi to everybody. You did.
Hello.
Yeah, sorry, I skipped right over you. I apologize.
It's okay.
How'd you get started there? Race relations in particular.
Oh boy. I guess I should go back a long time ago. I grew up in a white home between my mother and my grandparents raising me up on Flyers Drive off of Harland Road. And I grew up hearing, "Don't come home with a black man or a black man's baby." And as I said the day of the presentation, that didn't work because I have 3. I ended up at one point, because I started cutting up and responding to how my home life was. I also had a mixed race best friend at Lisbon School who, she introduced me to different people and whatnot. But my cutting up was, again, in response to how things were at home, but my friend, who was also living a troubled life, made it that much easier. So in response, I had to go to Elmcrest, because I was angry and depressed, according to other people. So through Elmcrest, my mother didn't want me to come home, so I went to go live with my aunt in Bloomfield. And my aunt, sent me to Bloomfield Public Middle School, which Carmen Arace, where I went from being, the majority at Lisbon and Moriarty and Sales Elementary School to now I was the minority. There was maybe like 4 white kids in the entire school. Most of the white kids went to private school, and my aunt and her lawyer husband weren't sending me there. At that point, I was starting to be able to see the disparity in education. Mm-hmm. I ended up tutoring a lot of the kids that were in my algebra class, just because
I can see that.
I whizzed through it.
Yeah.
Because algebra was always easy. Math, period, was always easy for me. Don't ask me about it now, because I'm not good with equations. I can't help my kids with their homework. But, that's where the disparity piece came in. And then my aunt had this book, which I also mentioned a 2 months ago, To Be a Slave. Now, the book was actual letters that the slaves had written, exposing what actual life for them was like. And needless to say, it was nothing like what I learned in school. It was horrifying. The torture that they endured was...
It was disgusting.
Absolutely. Thank you. So at that point, that started opening my eyes to being on a search of finding out actual truth versus what just the history books told me and relying on what my teachers were telling me. So from there, it was a knowledge search. Going to NFA, I ended up falling in with a lot of African American and Hispanic people. I don't necessarily know how that happened, but I'm glad it did.
I mean, I got to imagine, like you said, you had never been the minority before, and then you go spend that time in Bloomfield. That's got to become who you're comfortable around, I'd imagine, right?
I think so. But even then, I found that being around African Americans and Hispanics, and in no way, shape, or form am I trying to stereotype at this point, but I'm talking about my experience. It was no judgment. It was the embracing factor. You could be who you were. You didn't have to live up to the standard of what your family wanted you to be, and fake the funk to try to please your family. And that's really what started it. Even going, fast forward, incarceration, looking at the population of the prison systems, going to college for a little while, writing a paper on the disparities in the criminal justice system, and then just watching what happens on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
Even in Norwich.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just Black Lives Matter. It wasn't the rallies and the marches and George Floyd that had me fighting the fight, so to speak.
You were fighting the fight way prior to
I've
that.
been fighting the fight, been trying to educate my family. That's where it really started with, was my family.
Yeah.
It has to start at home.
I think one thing I just wanted to bring up before we, fast forward from adolescent to teenage years to incarceration to like
everything,
present,
yes.
which is great to kick off on that. But you're in a school, you're tutoring and helping out other kids. You're obviously making friendships. You went to NFA. You're comfortable around a certain group of people, which is great. Like everybody kind of falls into who they're comfortable with.
Absolutely.
I think all of us have done the same thing. And then it gets to the point where it's like you mentioned incarceration. So the point, and I'm not trying to timeline you,
As you're timelining me.
but it is very important.
Yeah.
It kind of molded you into who you are. So if you feel comfortable, talk kind of going over a little bit of that period of time where you obviously learned something. You're maybe on the wrong side of the fence, but there are reasons why that happened. If you don't mind, talking about it a little bit.
Let's see. I was the oldest out of 6 children, the only one with a different dad. My father was not active in my life until I was 12, and then he had disappeared not long after.
Yeah.
In the midst of all that, I started running away from home, roughly 8th grade into 9th grade. And I started realizing, how I was being treated different in my own home because I was the oldest with the different dad. You have a 7-passenger vehicle, so between my mother, my stepfather, and my 5 siblings, who gets left home?
Right.
Exactly.
Got it.
Who's, cleaning and cooking and, has these high expectations of all these chores being done in the family's absence. It was me. My stepfather was very indifferent towards me. He didn't molest me, but he did inappropriate things around me. My mother didn't believe those things. So in the midst of all that, it's when I started being introduced to this whole street life. I started off on Franklin Street, actually. I started out as a lookout for some Spanish folks that used to sell drugs, and graduated to be in the back of the house, out on the back stairs, and somebody was routing all the customers to the back, and from there they kind of fell apart, and then I ended up on Boswell and Lake Street starting off the same way, looking out, and then, oh wait, I was pretty good at this. I can bag crack, I can sell crack. Couldn't cook it, but I could do everything else. And as time went on, I said, well, why am I doing this with anybody else when I can do this myself?
Right.
You know, Norwich isn't one of these places where it's divided by this is my block, this is my block, this is my block, and you better not be on my block. And if it was unspoken. Nobody was doing anything about it.
Build your
so
own business.
I did. And from there, I met my middle child's father, and we just became Bonnie and Clyde, which kind of roller coastered into bids. I had already spent, at 17 years old, I had spent 2 months in York as a youthful offender. You know, and even rewinding, being on Boswell Avenue is how I found my father again.
Yeah.
You know, I'm thinking he's looking for a trick, and come to find out, he's looking for the same thing I'm selling. So this is how we maintained our relationship, was me being his dealer and him being my customer, and me having that sick way of thinking that, well, it's better he gets it from me than somebody else. And, oh, well, this is the child support that he hasn't paid, and,
Yeah.
you know.
I've got to imagine that feels like an ounce of power over somebody that kind of like affected your life in a way that was what sounds really damaging. Like, do you think that you find those maybe relationships that you're missing at home out on the street? Like, is that what makes it appealing? Like, you know, you said you started as a lookout, and there was, you know, hey, you were running away from home, you're hanging out down here, and then like, what do you find appealing about it? What draws you to go, hey, I'll be involved?
It's the different lifestyle. It's, you see it in the movies, you read about it in certain books, you might even hear about it in music. However, you know, growing up, ironically, my grandfather wanted me to be a pharmacist, you know, so my mother always joked, like, oh, well, you kind of did become one. And it's like, you know, and it was like, at that point, how can I totally go against the standard that was set for me, you know, and all these expectations that my family had, and how can I rebel the best way possible, and how am I going to hurt them the same way they hurt me?
Yeah.
You know, and that's how it was. And it is a very embracing environment, because at the end of the day, when you're helping somebody sell drugs, and when you're the front man while they get to sit in the background, you're the one going to jail. So of course they're going to make you feel like you're loved and embraced, and, you know, you're one of us. And
You're the bait.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And when the sharks come, guess who's going in the boat?
Oh yeah, you better be able to run fast. I still have a scar on my ankle from hopping a fence in Greenville years ago. Can't tell I could hop a fence now, but
Yeah.
I dodged a few of them way back when.
It
So-
sounds like a really kind of romanticized, not the version you're telling, but it sounds like it'd be easy for you to romanticize that entire lifestyle, right? Like you say, it's in the books, it's in the movies, and you know,
It's fast
you
money.
saw it elsewhere, and it's like, it's a big adrenaline dump, right? It's the adrenaline dump and an oxytocin dump. So you're suffering with these people, you're working with these people, you're running from the police, you're moving quick. And
Oh, yeah.
so you're gonna dump all that oxytocin, all that adrenaline together, and now that bond is, you know, it's tough to break at that point, I'd imagine.
You become family.
Right. Family that maybe wasn't there for you otherwise.
Exactly.
Do you think that's the normal story? Is that how it goes for most people that wind up in that?
Yeah, nobody wakes up one day and is like, oh, I'm gonna go buy a 8-ball of crack or a
Right.
bundle of dope and go sell it. That's not realistic as to how it goes. You know, you're introduced.
I tell you, you know, a lot of the I say classes, but even like personal history, with my father, who, we've talked about it before. It's just trauma. Humans or people in general, like, they just deal with their trauma in certain ways. And it's, your story is, I mean, we're going to get into all of the positives, but it's very good to, for the listeners and people that, don't know Carol-Lynn Turner and are gonna hear this no matter where they are, building this foundation of, the roller coaster of a lifestyle that you had. And, in the next few minutes, we're gonna, discuss all of the positive things that you're doing, because you're basically like the Rock in Norwich, Connecticut.
Oh, thank you.
Which is it's true. I mean, we've seen it.
Yeah.
It's unreal, the amount of positive things that you're doing for the community. And you went back and you talked about, that 6th, 7th, 8th grade, 9th grade freshman year was your real molding years into that lifestyle, but you're helping out hundreds of kids in those age brackets.
Yeah.
Now. And, I think we can kind of segue into what kind of guided you into, obviously, the night flight thing, but just taking that step back. You said you did a couple bids at York. You probably read some books. You probably got, some help while being incarcerated, if you don't mind, kind of, because I think that's like the beginning point of stepping out of that lifestyle, climbing that ladder, and transitioning into, into what you're kind of doing now.
And I have a specific question about York, actually. I'd be interested to know who you were in prison and how you fit into that community, because I'm starting to notice a thread of, hey, I was this systematizing person, really good at math, and I took that and I was tutoring kids. When I got over there, I started tutoring kids in math, and I was really good at that. And now you're the systematizer for Night Flight. You're the systematizer for Rose City United, and it's always, it seems to be this in service of others thing. And even in between, when it's not in such a positive route, it's like, oh, well, no, I couldn't cook the crack, but I served as the lookout and I could bag it. I got things organized.
I did learn how to cook crack eventually.
I'm sorry. Yeah, but you're the organizer everywhere. It seems to be that you're the organizer wherever you go, and it's usually in service of somebody else. And I wonder, does that hold true in York? Does that hold true in lockup?
Let me see. When I did my 2-month stay as a youthful offender, I was the young, wild, and just didn't give an F. I had gotten into a fight. It was, I did the segregation thing. I caught the tickets, and it wasn't a very comfortable 2 months that I was there, but that was my fault. So as I, got older and still maintained this lifestyle, when I did have to go back, while I was waiting to get out on bond, actually, I ended up with a lot of Dominican roommates that were waiting to be deported, because York is a holding facility in the midst of people going up to New York to then get deported. So the Dominican women that I had as roommates, they didn't speak a lot of English, and I didn't speak a lot of Spanish. So at that point, we were able to teach each other basics of each language. So I think I've always had, even though there was that following capability, but you have to follow the lead. So I've always had the leadership in me. And my grandparents were always leaders within, like, the Catholic Church. They were always leaders as far as they would do the, what is it called? The Rosary Society and Legion of Mary, that's what it's called. And they would always do the book sales, and they were servants. They were servants to the Virgin Mary and to Jesus, as they put it. But for me, yes, I'm a servant of Christ, but in the same breath, leading was implanted in me from the start.
Yes, service leadership, right? That's when we teach leadership classes or take them. Servant leadership is an entire classification of person. It's really arguably what we all strive to.
Oh yeah,
to become,
absolutely.
right?
But yeah. So for that time, that's what it was. It was teaching English, and I was learning Spanish, and from there I bonded out. My son's father was waiting for somebody to bond him out, and then once that happened, he bonded me out, and then I was back on the street 100 miles and running. Mind you, my daughter was living with my mother through DCF. When I was in the midst of getting ready to I ended up getting pregnant after this bond out. Then from there, became incarcerated again a few months before it was time for me to give birth. But this time, there wasn't a bond out. It wasn't even worth me bonding out because I was already waiting to get sentenced for this last
Right.
stuff. So I ended up having my oldest son while incarcerated. And you would think that would be, the motivating factor to say, you know what, I've got one kid with my mother already, facing adoption. Now I'm having a baby while I'm incarcerated, so I should go home and be different. And of course, that's the story I sold to the parole board, right? I wanted to go home. However, I came home, and this time it was just me by myself completely. And what did I do? I got back involved in the streets. In the midst of that, though, I was still there for my oldest two kids as much as possible. I got pregnant with my youngest son, who I was going to give up for adoption and ended up not, thank God, because even though he drives me insane, that's my guy.
He's a good dude.
He is.
Yeah,
Kai
he's
is great. Eric is great in his own respect,
Yeah.
but yeah, Kai is different. But that's okay. It's all right for them to be different. I don't want them to. I don't want my kids to be carbon copies of each other. But during the time of being incarcerated, yes, I was reading books, and yes, I was aspiring for all these different things I wanted to do. And the one person that I had that was a huge factor in me starting to think about change was my son Eric's great-grandmother, Mrs. Kelly. And she used to write me, and she'd accept calls, and she, you got to go to church, you got to go to church. There's no wrong reason to go to church. And I ended up going to church and jail, to the Christian services or Protestant services or whatnot. And the preacher, it was like he was talking to me that day, came out feeling good, kept going to church. And yeah, I got this great feeling. But again, I went home, and what happened? Fast money again, right? Because I wasn't addicted to the drugs. I was addicted to the money. And I didn't feel as a felon that I was going to have the opportunity now to get a good job. And, it was that mindset, like, I'm not going to flip burgers. And,
And you're also needed.
Yeah, I'm too good to flip burgers. That was really the mindset. I ended up having my youngest son, and he stayed with me, and still selling drugs. But in the meantime, his godmother had invited me to go to what was Tabernacle of Deliverance and Praise Ministries up on formerly Hunter's Road and the corner of Harland, right? So I went, but I wasn't going that day because I was looking for anything. I was going because I wanted to prove that Devin was faking, because that's a whole segue, right?
Really?
Oh, yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because that's a whole nother story. But I went because I wanted to prove Devin was faking, because at the time, Tank and I were still friends. And I just wanted to believe Tank was innocent. I wanted to believe that he was wrongfully in there and that Devin was a fraud. And I went, and needless to say, I wasn't able to prove that. And from there, I just faithfully started attending this church, right? Well, as I'm actively selling drugs, not telling anybody I'm actively selling drugs, I was asked to lead the youth group. So, okay, I'm, kind of feeling conflicted about that.
You're
Cause,
like borderline fencing it. You're like
Yeah.
standing at the top of the fence.
yes, so I ended up...
This is
I ended up not leading
Good
it.
story. Yeah.
Ended up not leading it. However, I took part in it. And because of my finances, I was able to help plan field trips that they wouldn't normally be able to go on and whatnot, and have activities that otherwise they probably couldn't afford to do. So from there, that was really where I was able to start interacting with the youth, and primarily African American youth at that time as well. Being, again, I wasn't being judged. I was accepted, and I'm sure some of the people in the church knew that I was selling drugs, because some of the people in the church were people I was in the street with. And some of them might have still been in the street themselves. Like, the church had the name, like, oh, that's where all the thugs and the drug dealers go. But in the same breath, that was the one church where the drug dealers and the thugs were changing their lives. And I'm one of those testimonies for that church. I ended up catching another case, a drug case. I was violated on 2 probations. I bonded out. Stayed out until I was sentenced, ironically, August 8th of 2008, 888. I'll never forget that day. But God was on my side that day. Here it is, repeat offender, these probation cases. And I believe she gave me 30 months with nothing hanging. And she wouldn't give me probation because she said I couldn't do it. Judge Handy. Thank you, Judge Handy, if you're anywhere watching.
Judge Handy will listen to this.
Yes. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. While I was incarcerated, I got involved again with the church. I got involved with the Tier 1 and Tier 2 programs, not because I wanted to initially, but because they said I had to make parole. So in the time of doing that, I started learning the steps, right? Now, when you think of AA and NA, you're like, oh, that's drug addicts and alcoholics, and I'm neither. So why do I have to do the steps? But when you actually read the steps, there's no mention of drugs and alcohol in the steps. So you can apply it to anything that
pattern
you're
you don't like,
addicted to, any pattern. Yes, exactly. So needless to say, I started kind of working on the steps without working on the steps. And it was like, okay, I need to start making amends with people. I need to start allowing myself to heal. I need to start changing my mindset and, focusing on more positive things. And it was crazy because, here it is. I think at that point I was like a 6 or 7 time felon or whatever. And, I rewind real fast. I was able to get a job at the food market in MGM as they were opening, right? So I was part of this opening crew for them. They're not there anymore. They wrote a letter for me for parole. Like, they were sad that I had to leave to go to jail. Like, they ended up coming through for me when it came time for parole. But on top of that, God was working on my side. And also with that, it was what I was doing in the prison system was working on my side too. I was working off grounds, which I had also done the previous bid. No tickets. The SEALs liked me. This person that I was back when I was 17 and a youthful offender had disappeared. I didn't want to do SEG again. I just wanted to go home. I wanted to see my youngest son. I wanted to see my oldest 2 kids. And that's what I did. I got early parole on top of that.
Oh, wow.
They overrode my mandatory time, and off to perception programs I went in Willimantic at 11 months in.
How old were you at the time?
29.
Oh, so your 20s, teens, 20s?
My teens and 20s were all drugs and in and out of incarceration.
I think that, just like we talked to the recovery, the recovery community, people that are struggling with drugs and alcohol, and it's always with every case that I've ever seen, it's not like they come in and it's like, okay, I'm going to be still sober now for the rest of my life.
Right.
It just doesn't work that way.
No.
It's steps, and you're discussing and talking about, I mean, I believe in higher power. Some people don't. To each his own. But it's like these stairs and these like ladder, like it just kind of like happens, and then you meet somebody else, and it's like, oh, you know, that's another step that I'm kind of guiding in the right direction. And I think everybody, every person, whether how bad you're struggling, and you know, we're police officers. Trust me, we struggle. You know,
I believe it.
We struggle with a lot of stuff that kind of happens and stuff that we see, and you know, when you're kind of in that hole, you don't know who or what or when or why you meet people. Like, you know, we met. You know, you met Nick, and now we're sitting here talking in front of all these cameras. You're discussing your story, and it's incredible. But it's like these steps just kind of happen. And are you gonna like take that step? And like all the stuff that you're doing now with the community, like you're literally giving.
I feel like you have to say yes when those things come, because I do feel like stuff like that falls into your lap.
Yeah.
It's just like, hey, you're walking by all these doors, and this one just happens to be open. It's like, right? It happens to be open, and you could just go, oh well, there's a million reasons not to do it, right? But I find that wherever my life improves, it's because I walked through some stupid door that happened to be open. And I went, you know what? Yeah, why not? Let's do that.
Yep.
Like, well, let's just do that.
And the wild thing that I have to mention, because we're going to get into all the positive stuff you do in the community, is like you're smart, you're intelligent.
Thank you.
Are organized, extremely intelligent. You have great personal skills. You know, you've developed all these things, you know, in your life, and you know, now you're doing everything for the right reasons. And there's going to be people that are selling drugs, that are out on the street, that are listening to this interview right now, and hopefully it's just a door that they can open up. Because
What's the door? What's the specific door it's going to open? Call us?
Call us.
Email us?
Email
What's the
us.
first thing they do? You're that person right
You're
now
that
that's
person,
like,
yeah.
maybe it's time for me to be done. Oh, I happened to find this podcast, or I was friends with so-and-so and Kara shared it to them, and here it is, and I bothered to listen.
Yeah, no. Anybody who would like to reach out to me, you can first and foremost find me on Facebook, Carol-Lynn Turner, and Cara-Lynn, and then Turner. I'd be glad to talk to anybody who's looking for that first step. My phone number, if you reach out to either of these gentlemen, I authorize you both to pass out my number if that's the case. I'm not going to just put it out there because I get enough spam calls already.
Yeah.
However, you know, I'm here. I'm here to help, and literally, it's a mindset thing. You have to change your mindset. You know, the same way I said, where I was too good to flip burgers and I'm not going to flip burgers. And well, guess what I was doing at the food market? I was flipping burgers. I learned how to make pizza, like where you actually toss the dough in the air type stuff, okay? I learned how to make Asian stir fry. I learned how to pop open oysters and clams, right? Who would have ever thought that I would have been doing that?
You also learned how to show up for work.
Exactly. For like $8.25 an hour when I was making 1,000 plus a day. You know, and it's humbling. And not to say that I didn't fall back into selling drugs for a minute. I had a doctor that was giving me tons of prescription painkillers. I wasn't taking all those. My father went from being a crackhead to a heroin addict, and it killed him when I was incarcerated. You know, not that I have this addiction problem, but I have an addictive personality, obviously, because of the money, right?
Sure.
So of course I sold them. And even tried to sell crack again and tried to sell weed again, and I just didn't feel comfortable in that realm, but I was all right selling pills because, you know, it's one or two people that buy all of them. Well, when the prescriptions ran out, it was just straight up working again, right? So working, delivering papers, working at the food market. I worked for the Hartford Current for like 5 years, right? Every night, 2, 3 a.m., getting up, delivering your newspapers, and going home, right? Being involved in the church, I was able to, again, have the opportunity to lead the youth group, Determined Youth Making a Difference. And myself and my sister in Christ, and sometimes you would think that we were blood sisters, the way that we both interact with each other. LaShawn Cunningham, who is the now CEO of Blooming into Greatness and Unique Praise Anointed Worship, we led the youth group, and from there we're teaching the kids how to perform. I'm not coming from a performing arts background.
Right.
She's showing me this stuff, right?
She's teaching you.
She's teaching me, exactly. And certain kids that she couldn't get through, I could, and not because of my history, because it wasn't a drug history or a background that they had, but it was just some type of way I had with dealing with the kids. And I think a lot of it is because the missing out on my own children, it was like I had this sense of patience with other people's kids, and I stress other people's kids.
Yeah, of course.
And I was just good at it. So from there, we started doing Black History programs, because the church every year for Black History Month wanted some type of Black History program, which was usually in the church. Well, LaShawn had the idea to get it out to Donald Oak Theater. So, we had this big Black History program, maybe like 6 years ago, I think. Donald Oak Theater. It was pretty packed.
Yeah.
The support of the church members and other people in the community. It was phenomenal. And so now we're like, okay, we got to start planning for another one, right? Now, granted, we're being activists at that point, not realizing that we're being activists at that point, because we're bringing awareness, right?
Sure.
We're putting focus on an issue. So from there, the following year, we ended up doing another program, but this time was the history of African American, the history of music through African Americans, I believe was the title of it. And, we had kids doing dances from like the Bindi Hop, I think Lindy Hop is what it was called, right?
Okay.
We had kids doing African dances. We had kids doing old school break dancing, and then this new school whip and nene stuff, right?
Yeah.
Awesome show.
Yeah.
But we also had the opportunity for awareness in that, talking about Mike Brown and Trayvon Martin and Emmett Till and bringing light to a problem,
Sure.
right? And
Through the arts.
through the arts, exactly. So this is where my activism really started, because as my brother Rashim calls LaShawn, he calls her Sister Soldier, right? She's unapologetically Black. She fights for her people. She fights for herself. She fights for equality, diversity, equity, inclusion, you name it. She's been fighting for forever, probably since birth,
It's in
right?
her soul.
It is. Absolutely is. And her activism lit a fire in me that, I kind of kindled way back when, but like she lit it, like and next thing you know, here I am.
Mm-hmm.
So when the Black Lives Matter response came from George Floyd's murder, it was LaShawn, myself, and Miss Judy Bell who got together to create that rally that we had at the NFA Green, which was different from every other rally because it was faith-based. Who, if you're a believer, the devil, Satan is not love, right? Satan is about separation. He's about hate. He's about ignorance. But
Keep everybody fighting.
what is God about? Love. And love covers the multitude of sins, right? So if you can accept God into your heart, and I'm not talking about the Christians who oh, it's a white Jesus and my Bible teaches me that I'm allowed to hate you. And
It's a higher power.
I'm talking about the Christians that are Bible believing, word living, relationship having with Jesus Christ, that there's no way in your soul that you can hate another person for any reason, right? You can dislike anybody you want, but to hate them, that's a sin. And granted, yes, we sin, we all fall short. However, God said to love him and to love each other as you love yourself. Well, if I live by loving you like I love me, where is there room for hate in my heart, right?
Right.
There's not. And if you live like that, there's no room for it. And if you live like that, there's no room for it. So the reason to have that faith-based rally was because you have a bunch of people coming together thinking that it's just another Black Lives Matter rally, right? You didn't know you were getting spiritually fed. You didn't know that if you didn't know Christ that you were about to be introduced. See, it's about planting the seed. So the seed was planted that day. Now, has anybody been saved or proclaimed a newfound faith in Christ since then? I don't know. Nobody's told me, but the seed was planted. Our job was done.
Right. Well, I think even if they don't, because I think one of the things that happens with Christianity in particular is people get bogged down in the dogmatic aspect, or they get bogged down really in just the metaphysic, right? It's like, oh, well, how many years old is the earth? It's like, no, time out, you're missing it, right? And I think even if they don't walk away, hey, I'm proclaiming my love for Jesus Christ, it's like, you go to something like that and you feel what it's like when people are together and they're unified and it's nothing but love, similar to the way like you guys operate with Night Flight and Leonard's whole vibe, right? And I think people find a sense of belonging, that they're touching the transcendent at that point, right? They're touching something greater than themselves through just being together with that vibe, for lack of a better word. If you stay in that long enough and you find more places where you're in that, then it's inevitable. You're connected to a higher power, whether you like it or not. And it doesn't have to have, the name that you and I subscribe to it, or anybody else's specific name. It's finding yourself in that, right?
Yeah.
And I think,
I don't care if you worship God, Allah, Buddha. Like at the end of the day, every faith has the same principles, if you really look at it, and it's love.
And it's honestly what, thousands of years ago, that's what people needed, because all it was wars.
Exactly.
Just wars. Everybody fighting, everybody killing each other, everybody trying to be like the king. And if we continue to live that lifestyle, we're just going to destroy ourselves.
and I think a lot of the way that we're engaging, well, the public at large is engaging with current event issues. That's what we're missing. We're missing transcendent agreement. We don't have a thing that we all look up to and go, okay, we're all beneath that, right? As a group, and we've lost that in a really scary way. I'm sure by now, I'm preoccupied with the division end of all this. I understand, hey, there's racial stuff that needs to go on. There's human rights stuff that has to happen, and people agree and disagree about how to do that and where it applies and where it doesn't, blah, blah, blah. To me, the main concern is that it's become so divided about it. And I think it's a lack of shared value, shared idea of what maybe transcendence is. And it's nice to see that get pieced back into place. And I think everywhere we've gone in the last year and a half or so, I find people saying the same thing or expressing the same sentiment. And I really appreciate the way you and LaShawn actually both engage with your activism in that way. And to be clear, I like that method of activism because it's active. It's not merely waving a sign saying, I don't like it. That's cool. That's a great way to get all eyes on me, right? But without the follow-up of, and here's how we're going to do something about it, it's...
You get a lot of likes. Now we got to roll our sleeves up and
Amen.
And we got to roll our sleeves up and get. Sometimes you got to get your hands a little dirty, and sometimes you're going to be told something that you don't like. Which is, as cops, we've, nonstop kind of took it on the chin, but we listened. And we're learning, and we learn every day. And that's something that, I've learned from you, having the conversations that we've had, and, everything that you're doing with Night Flight is awesome. And you're giving these kids an opportunity to, like, see. And then you talk about the arts, what she's doing with, dancing and the arts, and, creating content, positive content. We notice all of it.
And providing people a place to succeed.
Absolutely.
That's the other thing that keeps getting lost lately is, hey, I understand there's human rights issues, but if you've got kids and you're raising them up and going, the whole system's rigged against you, you're never going to make it. You're never going to, wrong message, right? Hey, how about the whole system's rigged against you and we're better than that and you can do whatever you want to do.
Absolutely.
And we're going to help you and we're going to make that happen. And I see that out of Night Flight. I see that out of Blooming into Greatness. It's like, it's not a denial of the issues as they exist. But it's empowering. It's, hey, no, but we're going to go through anyway. And we're going to get this done. And you can be whatever you want to be. And I just wish I heard more of that in the public discourse of, hey, yeah, things aren't perfect. They've never been perfect. We've come a long way. But guess what? We're better than it. And I just wish I heard more of that. People are so starved for encouragement. It's saddening. Like some of the people we encounter on the street, you give them a positive word, a word of encouragement, and just say like, hey, you're better than this. You deserve better than this. You're capable of, you're not living up to your potential.
They don't buy it.
Yeah, like you're extremely intelligent.
They
You can
eat
do
it up.
anything.
They
Why are you
eat it
selling
up.
drugs?
If you say to some of the people, not everybody, but a lot of the people are just starved for it in a way that's, hey, you're capable of doing this, this, and this. And you can see they've not been given an ounce of encouragement their entire lives. And it's, I don't know, you guys are providing that. And I hope there's more versions of that to come somewhere. I don't know who can do them.
And one thing I wanted to add, and you talked about your father and my father, who's an addict, Vietnam vet, got addicted to pills, alcoholic, for my whole teenage years. And I had CCAR training, which is, recovery coach training, basic recovery coach training. And it was people from New Zealand. There was a guy from Australia. There was recovery coaches from LA. There were police officers, Waterbury, Danbury. It was basically half of the group was recovery community people that were, addicts that are in recovery, because you're in recovery your whole entire life. You're not just like in recovery and then you're good.
Yeah.
It's a maintenance process. And then the other half are law enforcement. And trust me, there's issues in law enforcement. We go to sometimes you go to 3, 4, 5 traumatic incidents in a shift, where a lot of people, they maybe have, 5 to 10 really traumatic incidents
In a lifetime.
So the one thing that somebody brought up was the word stigma. So in the recovery community and in training, you don't talk about it. You don't talk about it, because if you continue to talk about that word, then it puts people down. There's a stigma to being a drug addict. So you're not going to talk about it. You're not going to say that word. We don't say that word. Then they don't. You're in recovery, and your every day is a maintenance day. Every day you wake up, and a very close friend of mine who is, I don't have any siblings, but he's like a little brother to me. He sends me the 12 steps every single day.
Wow.
Every day he sends them to me in a text message. He wakes up in the morning, he has a group of people that he sends them to, and it helps me. There are days where I just need a break, and I'll read that, and it's all the stuff that you talked about. Waking up and having hate in your heart. Waking up and being mad at the world. The whole world is against me. And people listening to this, you said Judge Handy. Judge Handy's going to listen to this. She's going to. And there's probably a lot of prosecutors that are going to listen to this, and there's going to be a lot of people in the community and in government that are going to listen to this. And like, these are the conversations that we need to have, because as police officers, there's going to be a lot of cops that listen to this. We're here to protect. Like, there are things that happen, and the world is a very ugly place. And if we work together and we build that village up, it's just a win-win situation for everybody, and it's just constant maintenance.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be ugly.
No, it doesn't.
One person at a time, one mindset at a time.
Absolutely. And walk in, and I went to Night Flight yesterday, seeing those kids, a couple of them that I knew, great conversation, a couple kids, Either they don't like the police or it is what it is, it doesn't matter. But it's just kind of like changing that mindset and kind of gearing things in a better direction, because in the end, we're all here. We can't change the world, but we can help in our community and people in other communities if they kind of want to take, because everything's recorded. They want to listen to it, they want to kind of guide in the right direction. They're more than welcome to, you know, reach out to you and go in the right direction. What I wanted to get into now is a lot of the night flight stuff and some Rose City United stuff, because I really feel that, you know, you could go into some night flight, but, you know, Rose City United, let's kind of.
And I know we're
shift
tight
it
on
towards
time.
that.
I wanted to bring one more thing up just because it popped into my head when you were talking about the church and you were saying, oh, you know, you're on the fence here. Like, they're asking you to run this youth group, but you got these things going on. How important is it to be given that kind of trust? I guess, like, I'm not going to name any names, but there's somebody that I talk to on occasion at night flight, and I always kind of get a sideways look from cops because this person sells drugs. There's no question. But he's not selling drugs right now.
Yeah.
Right now he's out supporting kids. That's all he's doing. He's not up to dirt over there, period. And how much of that does somebody need to be given for just given the trust, given a small amount of trust so they can succeed with it and do something with it? And is that even part of it for being at the church? Like, oh, somebody trusts me.
Well, I think part of it for me was I really hadn't been going that long, so to be given that opportunity, I was pretty dumbfounded at the moment. But also, I was inspired, you know, and yeah, the trust, it's huge. And it wasn't long after that where I revealed what my true lifestyle was to the senior pastor, just because I didn't want her to have this idea of, you know, oh, I clean houses for a living. Well, that's what I used to tell everybody. I cleaned houses. I had a business, right? Well, I had a business, but it wasn't cleaning houses, right? And, you know, she still accepted me and loved me. And,
Right.
you know, just that piece, the unjudgmental acceptance after you trusted me enough to run this youth group, and I declined. But then on top of that, I'm telling you what I do, and she's telling me that's all right. Jesus is going to fix it. He's going to change you, right?
Yeah.
And he did. You know, anybody who was in Christ is a new creation, and here I am. You know, a lot of people will be like, oh, well, that's just you doing what you needed to do. But for me, I attribute who I am today to Jesus Christ. And everybody might not agree with that.
It's fine.
It is what it is.
They don't need
but
to.
that's who
They don't need to.
I, exactly.
I don't need to. Your life's better because of it. Your community is better
Exactly.
because of it.
Yeah,
Community's
your
better for
community
having
is
you in
getting
it.
Better for having
Yeah.
you in it.
Right.
And it's an awesome thing to see, you know, a community I used to tear down. Like, there's some of my friends whose parents I sold drugs to, and I see their parents now, and, you know, our relationship is so much different now, and not in a bad way,
Yeah.
you know, because they're not on drugs anymore, and I don't sell drugs anymore, so our relationship can be just pure at this point.
Perfect.
You know, my friends are, well, how does my mom know you? You know, but now I can tell
Back
them.
in the day.
Cleaned her house.
You know, I used to go to the Sportsman's, or, you know, I met her at Crocodiles or something. But at the end of the day, now I can be honest.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not living in secret. I'm not living in the dark. You know, light draws out
You don't have to look
the
over your shoulder.
darkness, and I don't, you know, and not saying that I don't think about selling drugs every now and then. You know, when money's funny, you're like, but then I think about the risk, and I think about everything I've worked for. So is it worth it?
Yeah, now, you know, once you start serving others in the way that you have, all of that's riding on it too. It's not just you anymore, right? Now it's, hey, how's this going to look on blooming into greatness? How would this look for Night Flight? How would this look? All these things that you're a part of that you know are doing that amount of good. It's like, it's not just your reputation on the line. It's not just
Yeah, it's theirs
you in
too.
prison.
And
it
you
belongs
know,
to everybody, and I think that probably makes it easier to make the right decision.
Listen, when I walked out of York Correctional Institution to go to perception programs, Next Step, on Valley Street in Willimantic, and even further when I finished parole, right? I knew this was going to be my last time. Ooh.
Leave it in, Justin.
I knew that my inmate number, 261-216, was going to be retired. Even though I still had some backwards behavior during that time, I knew that my last time incarcerated was going to be my last time. And really quickly, what we didn't touch on is I was able to work. I was hired by the same halfway house I paroled from. All right, I worked there per diem. You might as well have said I was kind of full-time because I seemed to be there all the time, but I worked there. It didn't work out because the executive director at the time and myself butted heads, but it's okay though. I worked for the same place I came home from.
It's wild.
And now here it is, really quickly going into Martin House.
You can keep talking.
Listen, I've been at Martin House. Martin House, they gave me a chance, right? Mm-hmm. I was doing home care. You don't make any money doing home care, not like that, unless you're overnighting it, which I couldn't because I had kids, right? Little kids. And Martin House, they took the chance on me. So now I'm per diem at Martin House. A month later, I'm part-time. 2 months after that, I'm full-time working underneath the executive director as an administrative assistant. My executive director, Paula Oberg, I love her, and I am so sad that she's retiring soon, ended up training me to do grants.
That's a perfect job for you.
That is
a perfect job for you.
Our development person
Organize the things.
Listen.
Get that money.
Listen, even before grants, she had entrusted me to start doing the annual fundraiser, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, I've been raising money for all different type of stuff for forever. So, I can do this, absolutely. So not only do I have all these different people in the community that I know, but now I have different, the board of directors. Now I know CEOs from other organizations through my employer. And here it is now, I ended up doing grant writing as well. So now I have a dual role, administrative/development assistant. And now my boss is retiring and I just interviewed recently for her job. Nice. So fingers crossed and prayerfully, you might be possibly looking at the new executive director of Martin House.
That'd be awesome.
That would be awesome. But even if that's not the case, my story speaks for itself. Yeah. From the drug dealer, from the inmate to the mother with the DCF stuff, and kids with mental illness, my own mental illness, and here I am. I'm still standing.
You're helping us.
Listen.
You're definitely helping us.
But you guys are helping me because before I got with Rose City United, I was like totally with the defunding the police stuff, right? And in a sense, I still kind of wish that there were certain things that as cops you guys didn't have to do.
Us too.
Exactly, right?
But who else is open 24/7 and they're in the heat of the moment?
Exactly,
Yeah.
but then that also brings to light what the mental health community needs to do, what the addiction community needs to do. Like, people need to be available for you guys to call, because mobile outreach over at Southeastern Mental Health or 211 for the youth, they're not helpful. And I've experienced that on my own when one of my children had a mental health outbreak last year, right? 211, call them because they're going to come and save the day. Really? I had to call the police, and then in the midst of my child having this mental health crisis, like, he fought the police, and he's good now, but that could have been avoided had 211 simply came out and did what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, the biggest thing is I don't like pointing fingers.
Yeah.
If there are some issues in our community and there's some things, let's
fix them.
Let's meet at the table. Let's fix them, let's help people out. When it comes to, for the Norwich Police Department, it's where I work, it's where I worked for the last 12 years. The community isn't safe with less cops.
It's not, especially with crime going up.
And with with less police officers, you have more police officers that are just flat out tired.
And I witnessed that by watching you and Brianna and Bob being held, and you're miserable.
We work through it. You
You do, but
there's
you're
ways, and
miserable.
we're lucky, and there's ways to work through it. But I think just these type of conversations, coming to the table, working, getting like I said, we're gonna continue to say it. It takes a village. Let's get everybody together, have the conversation. Instead of I'm sick of seeing this. I'm sick of just being at the end of the strings of this little puppet thing that's going on. Like, I'm not a puppet. I'm a person. I'm a cop. It is what it is. Like, we're all trying to do the same thing. I definitely wanted to add that, because everything that you're doing in the community, everything that your group's doing, and there are so many other groups in Norwich that hopefully we can get the opportunity to have them at this table and talk to them, because, this goes on the internet. Community Off the Cuff is on the Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Facebook, and on Instagram.
Follow us, or follow them rather. Follow Community Off the Cuff.
Follow us too. Follow Rose City
Rose
United.
City
Follow
United,
get
Night
involved.
Flight, blooming into greatness. But you know what though?
If you're sitting at home shaking your head, going, tired of listening to these cops, it's like, cool, come talk.
But
Come say something.
But this is what it is though.
Come hang out. Tell us we're wrong. It's cool.
Is that all of these organizations were created because there was a void, there was a need that needed to be met, right?
Yep.
So, Night Flight was created because there wasn't any adult recreation, basketball recreation.
Started with a men's league.
A men's
Right.
league, exactly.
We could talk about that a little bit. Started with a
Yeah.
men's league. Night
So-
Flight started with a men's league. Then
A men's league.
transferred
So
into...
hold on, but then Rose City United came because, okay, we're rallying and we have the police protecting us, but we're not talking actively to the police, right?
Right.
In our minds, it's still, you guys are the problem, and, not you guys personally, but,
Right.
the police are the problem, right?
The police.
The police,
Up there, whoever they are.
The greater, and then here it is for me and a lot of other people in Norwich. We're coming off the trauma of Chiron being killed.
Yeah.
So in that mindset, it's really like F the police, like, you killed my friend. Again, not you guys personally, but this is like the mindset that we're coming into this with.
Sure.
And you guys are adopting, maybe not everybody, but you guys are adopting this whole Blue Lives Matter thing, which, to each his own at this point, but it doesn't define you.
No, it doesn't. And I think we all run into it, and it's been same thing, my preoccupation with division, but slogans are the same as symbols. They mean something different to whoever's wearing it, to whoever's holding it, to whoever's looking at it, right? It's a poor form of communication. It's so low resolution that it leads us down this weird trap of assuming things about the other person. You just brought up defund the police. That could mean, oh, I hate the police, I want them punished, take their money away. And for some people, that's what that means.
Yeah.
It could also mean, I think the police are overworked in doing things they're not really qualified to do because we don't have other resources, and we need to develop those resources.
Absolutely.
Right? Blue Lives Matter could mean, I can't stand Black Lives Matter and I'm gonna stick it to them. It could also mean, hey, I feel like no one's speaking for us and we're kind of being lumped into a box, and like, we're still people. Right? And all
Yeah.
those slogans and symbols just get messy.
Yeah, the only thing I don't like, for me personally, with Blue Lives Matter is that it came more so as a response to Black Lives Matter.
That's what humans do.
Exactly, they react. So it would have been nice if Blue Lives Matter came at a separate time, especially when feelings were so intense, but in the same breath, police were feeling some type of way too, right?
It was there.
Yeah,
But-
and it got
but
kind
this
of
is
cropped
why-
up following Dallas too. You have some guy come and assassinate
shooting
5
and-
police
exactly.
officers, and the whole world's blowing up at the time, hates the police. I get it. There were a string of high-profile shootings. Some of them were no good. Some of them were, some of them were fine. Some of them were terrible. Some of them, but it's like radio silence when that happens. There is no, and we just felt really unsupported at the time, or at least I did personally. I remember seeing Dallas happen and nobody acknowledges it. Nobody says anything. You're going, do you see the division as a problem yet?
Yeah.
And you know, we've been taking it from politicians, from people on the street, right, who have this whole narrative that feels like all officers are the same thing somehow. And then when it comes our way, then when the high-profile shootings are directed towards us, it was like, hey, is anyone going to say anything about this? And that's kind of where the Blue Lives Matter thing got built up out of, right? It was that and us going, man, no one cares. No one cares that we're getting shot for somebody else's actions, right? And that's what it's about. It's somebody else did an awful thing. I'm sorry that happened. It's like, don't shoot me for it. And yeah, but I totally get why people get frustrated with it, and maybe it means something different to other people.
Yeah, you're
too.
right.
They'd give you a totally different explanation.
Well, that's even like, you know, I was told by, I'm not going to say who, but recently I've been going through a battle with a particular person where it's, oh, well, you support the organization Black Lives Matter. And it's like, no, I don't support the I've never donated. I don't visit the website. I don't know anybody in the organization. I just believe the fact that Black Lives Matter. My black children's lives matter. And that is just the statement that, not that all lives don't matter, because all lives matter too. But right now, it's the black and brown community that need the attention at the moment, right? And because of these disparities and inequities and exclusion that's going on within the system, correct? So that's why the people that scream Black Lives Matter so loudly. Some, yes, for the attention. Some want the likes, right? Some are, look at me and I'm part of something, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And I've received backlash after I stopped going to rallies, like, oh, well, you can't say anything because you're not moving, you're not with the movement anymore. And I'm like, who are you talking to? Like, you can stand out on a corner all day long.
Waving the sign's not helping
But at the end of the day, it's these meetings that I'm doing with politicians. It's these emails that I'm sending to politicians when I think that I don't like what they're gonna vote on. You know, I want you to vote in my best interest. So what do? I call and I email. That's activism.
Yeah.
You know, I don't
the
need
rallies
to still be on the corner.
They're an attention mechanism to draw attention to an issue. But after that, it's active is the word in there, right? Activism. Go do something.
Which is why, and I hope that somewhere across the country there's more organizations like Rose City United, because Rose City United created the opportunity for not only community leaders and activists to meet with the police and actually get to know you, but for the people to get to know you, and for you to get to know us. You know, because God forbid you end up in a situation where you might have to go to a call and it's somebody that has came to a coffee with a cop or been at some type of event that has been sponsored by Rose City United. You're not going in with the mindset of, oh, it's a possible break-in, you know, whatever, or an assault, domestic. Like, you actually might know this person a little bit now, so you're going to treat it a little bit different. You know, and that's what it's about. Is us getting to know you guys and you guys getting to know us.
And then us building our community better.
Exactly, which is why I jumped on the fact to get with Rose City United when I was able to, because it's a necessity.
And that's why you immediately responded to your email. Immediately.
Yes.
I didn't even know you knew me.
I knew.
You guys
idea.
should keep talking by all means. I have to jet. So
no, let's end it.
I'll thank you for coming on, as always, and I'll see you Tuesday.
I'm sure you will.
Yeah. Actually, no, I won't. I won't see you Tuesday.
Won't?
I have another meeting I have to go to on Tuesday, conflicting.
Why don't we just end it? Let's just.
You want to just end it?
Yeah, why
sure?
not?
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll just cut this part out, right?
We can, or we don't have to.
Or we can just let people laugh at us, right?
Yeah.
Why
You know
not?
what people like to say? Normal conversation, where they think it's like a screw up or a mess up.
Yeah, just make sure you cut out where I blew out my nose, or blew my nose, rather.
Yeah, we'll cut that out. This is boring.
Just cut that out. But other than that, we can keep it. You know, I'm sure my boss is like, where is she? But it is what it is. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you both.
I really enjoyed this too, and I'm sure you'll come on again, right?
Yeah, why not?
We got way more to dig into. There's always stuff coming.
Oh yeah, listen.
People need to know about the stuff and when it goes on.
There's layers to this, right? Levels to this.
Yeah,
100%.
But
absolutely.
Yeah, no, I had a fantastic time. So
thank you.
Too. That's been episode Community Off the Cuff.
Absolutely. We could talk about Night Flight next time.